Welcome in to another edition of Region Roundup. I'm James Boyd here with the ever busy Mike Clark. I don't think we ever have light days, Mike. It's pretty crazy, but we enjoy it.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I'm actually sitting here in my car. I just pulled over in a park so I could have hopefully a little bit of quiet here before I head out to do another interview. So yeah, it's supposedly, the spring is not as crazy as football or basketball season, although of course it is still football season in Illinois because it's a pandemic year. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. We'll get to that. Recruiting is kind of heating up again because it was shut down for so long. Schools are kind of getting lined up with their coaching staffs for next year again, something else we'll be talking about. But yeah, it's, there really isn't any downtime, especially, we were down for months and months and months last year, but now things are coming back to life. And, I know we've talked about this offline before, but I mean, it's what we do, and we're thrilled to be able to talk about things actually happening, whether they're on the field or, coaching hires, recruiting, stuff like that, because that's what we're here for. And we talked about this a lot during, the last year, we had to be a little bit more creative to find stuff to write about. We did. But, it feels more in the flow to be doing what we're doing now. So
Yes.
With that all being said, we do start off with recruiting, and one of your favorite players to watch, I know,
Yes.
because we've talked about this an awful lot. And I didn't get a chance to see Hammond High, but, I love, the fact that Reggie Abrams' personality definitely came through in your stories. An undersized kid, with a massive heart. His heart was bigger than he was. Clearly, led Hammond High to, a really tremendous run. And now he's going to get a chance to play D1 basketball and prove some more doubters wrong. I guess he's been proving doubters wrong, the last few years, obviously, at Hammond, but great opportunity for him.
Yeah, so he's committed to Incarnate Word as a preferred walk-on. For those of you who really follow Region basketball, you'll know that Carson Cunningham, the former Andrean standout who played at Oregon State and Purdue, he's their head coach. And from what I gathered from Hammond coach Larry Moore Jr., Carson was pretty interested in the program in general because they were playing so well over the last 3-4 years. And he always kept like an eye on Reggie, and then he finally, I guess, pulled the trigger and gave the kid a chance to earn his way or play his way into a scholarship. Reggie did tell me if things were normal, who knows if he comes in as a scholarship kid right away. But as we alluded to just a few seconds ago, the recruiting world and the sports world is kind of in a flux right now. It's kind of in limbo. A lot of kids in the transfer portal. A lot of kids who might be able to come back, another year if they want to because of COVID-19. So all that being said, for this 5'9", generously 5'9" guard, to have a chance to play at the highest level of college basketball, that's really something. And I think it's really cool how the region ties played a factor into it. Larry Moore played AAU basketball with Carson Cunningham, and the two of them have been pretty close ever since. And that's what kind of paved the way for Reggie to have a chance to play in college. And one of the interesting things about it, my story's already up. If y'all check it out, is Reggie went down with an ankle injury in their regular season finale. His recruiting basically ceased to exist after that. And Incarnate Word was the only one that stuck around, which was kind of surprising to me. Like when I asked him, I said, I wasn't asking like what Division I schools are interested in you. I was like, hey, what schools were interested in you in general? And he kind of hesitated. He was like, man, really none of them. And I was like, wow, like that kind of surprised me because I figured, NAIA Division II, Division III might have given him a chance. But either way, I'm glad that this has a happier ending because it was really sad to see him go down. I was there when he got hurt against Valpo on February 26th, and to me, that basically derailed what possibly could have been, a state title run for Hammond. I mean, he was their starting point guard for the last 4 years. In my opinion, when he was healthy, arguably the best and most impactful guard in the region, alongside Kamari Peterson from Westside, who Reggie outplayed. When they played earlier this year, people can argue about that whenever they want, who's better. I'm not here to really say that. I'm just saying that the kid showed up in a big game against Westside and took it to him. So all that to say, I'm excited for him, happy for him. Told him I got to get an Incarnate Word shirt pretty soon here so I can rep him all the way here, in the Midwest as he goes down to San Antonio. But and also just from a personality standpoint, he's a really good kid with a really good head on his shoulders. So I have no doubt about him staying out of trouble and doing what he's supposed to do as far as just off the court stuff. So it's just hoping that he gets a chance to prove himself on the court, because I know if he gets a chance, he'll do everything he can to do so. And I really encourage you to read that story. I talked to his mom, who told me that all of his toughness comes from her. So I enjoyed talking to her. And Mike, it was funny when I was doing the story, I was talking to him. I was like, hey, you know what? Can I talk to your mom? Because I've done a ton of stories on Reggie. I've talked to, a lot of different coaches on their staff beyond Larry Moore. His older cousin, Aaron, is on staff. So I talked to him for a story earlier. And, I've interviewed so many people that surround Reggie. And I was like, you know what, man, can I talk to your mom? And she was down to do the interview. And it was one of the most fun interviews I've done in a while, just because she's got that personality. You kind of see where Reggie gets his personality from, too. So she said she was really proud of him. And she told me that his dad, who passed away when Reggie was 6, will be proud as well. So it's really just a big moment. And she was telling me she's just happy for him and excited to, for her only son, to get a chance to do what he loves.
Yeah, for sure. And I know, that you have a special place for, for kids, who are close to their moms. So, that's that was
gotta talk to mom every now and then, Mike.
Yeah. Also related to recruiting, we have two guys who are kind of putting things on hold for a year. Krishawn Christmas and Harold Wood of Krishawn Christmas of Westside, Harold Woods of Hammond, are staying closer to home at Don Bosco Prep, which is, as folks may know, is a post-secondary school in the region, and they've helped a lot of kids in the past. And this is really important this year because there just aren't as many opportunities out there, and it's a chance for them to play at a pretty high level. They play a kind of a mix of schools. They play like other post-grad schools. They play some colleges and stuff too, some JVs and JUCOs and stuff like that. But it's a good opportunity for them to keep working on their game, and hopefully the recruiting environment improves for them in another year.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was worth writing about simply because these two guys in particular, I know they probably have some other region guys who are going there. These two guys I know had Division I scholarships on the table and could have taken them, but they decided to basically, like you said, use 1 more year for prep and wait for college basketball to kind of, get more settled. It'll still be a little weird over this next 4-year cycle because of having the ability to come back for another year because of COVID. So it won't be, the same, as it was in years past, at least for the foreseeable future. But I can't imagine that, next year, hopefully when a lot of people are vaccinated and this is kind of, a thing of the past, then you'll see more like, regular basketball movement, because there's thousands of kids in the transfer portal. Krishawn was telling me, coaches are obviously moving around as well. And they just want to make sure that when they get the chance to play college basketball, they're going somewhere or they'll have a chance to kind of have some stability and some structure and things like that. So, no knock on those guys. And I think it's, again, and Krishawn said it best, your path is your path. If you're good enough to play, at, a new I mean, if you're good enough to play at a high level, you'll get there. I mean, they like people get paid a lot of money to find kids who can play, at the Division I level, which both of those kids are capable of. And who knows? I mean, you go to Bosco and you play well for a year and get better and expand your skill set, you might even end up with more offers on the table after that. They have a good reputation over there of prepping kids and basically sending them off to, Division I's. I know that they've had a reputation for that, and at least in the few years that I've been here. And I look forward to whatever the future holds for those two very humble kids. I told Harold Woods, Mike, he doesn't smile ever. He's like the most laid back player ever. And I told him,
unlike Reggie, obviously.
Yeah, Reggie's like you see everything on his face, and then Harold's like, if he's up 20 or down 20. And I told him, I was like, you know what, man? I said, you don't smile much, but when you ball out this next year at Bosco and you go Division I, can you smile for me then? And he laughed, and I'm looking forward to just seeing what's next for those guys. I mean, they're two really good players. And like I said, had a chance to go Division I, right away, but decided to hit that pause button. And I can't criticize somebody for trying to make sure their path is best for them. So there you go.
Absolutely, and just a real quick note. No Indiana Boys All-Stars for us this year. Also no first, second, or third team AP All-Staters, which not a super surprise, I don't think. It's in a normal year, it's tough to kind of break through in the region to get some statewide recognition. And there were a lot of really good players, and we just talked about a few of them. Not quite like there is on the girls' side, where you've got, just some folks like Jessica Carruthers, obviously, who's a junior all-star on the girls' side. Actually, we've got junior all-stars, obviously, but, and nothing against this class, but I mean, it just was kind of a strange year in terms of getting attention and everything like that, too. And a lot of it does come down to college attention. And if you don't have the college attention, then that's something that you're probably not going to see necessarily play out in these postseason awards. And again, it's just, the kids, went out, played, they had a full season, for the most part. There were a few pauses, I guess, but, mostly a full season, but it's just, that's the way it played out this year. And again, nothing against the senior class, because they went through a lot over their last 2 years of high school, obviously.
Yeah, so. I caught some heat on Twitter because I said I thought Westside's Kamari Peterson was the only guy from the region who had an outside chance to make the team. And I think people took that as disrespect, but it's not. I wasn't taking a shot at any kids. I know one of the names that was brought up was Christopher Mantis, who is an all-star caliber player. But one thing I was just saying was I thought that Kamari had the best chance to do it. I didn't see two kids getting in from the region. If I had to pick one, I thought it was him because of, simply put, in my opinion, the exposure, Mike. I mean, Westside played a really tough schedule all year. They made it to a semi-state. And, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that if they go to state, does he get, the all-star nod just from playing on that stage? You never know. So it wasn't a slight towards any players or anything like that. Every year there are snubs, but I think that the snub thing kind of gets overused, in my opinion. I mean, like you said, on the girls' side, we had two Indiana All-Stars, Courtney Blakely, who led the state in scoring, and Trinity Thompson, who was the double-double machine. And like you said, we also had junior All-Stars on the girls' side, who was Jessica Carruthers and Lily Stoddard. And on the boys' side, this year we had a junior All-Star in Jalen Washington. So I looked at the list of players. I believe there were 14. And they all, were deserving. So, I mean, there's always going to be every year some players you think should be on there, shouldn't be on there, whatever. But the bottom line is that list is out, and that's the end of it. I mean, I have no say-so in who gets picked for these teams. I have people tell me, oh, man, don't, it's not like I'm here to root for any kids or root against any kids. And, again, I say this when I go cover games, Mike. Yes, it would be nice to cover teams that win or win the state championship or, win a big game. But I can't say that the other team doesn't deserve it, just as much. So it is what it is at this point. I mean, every year you're going to have people that are upset about this list. But that's just what it is. I have no control over who gets picked. And, I just enjoyed kind of going through the picks myself and seeing who they selected, and that was that. I mean, all those guys are deserving, and that takes nothing away from the careers that we saw here in the region, particularly for Mantis and Peterson over the last 4 years.
For sure, and now we switch a little bit to some early spring action, and a lot of perfect games in the air. We got three pitchers, two softball, well, actually three softball and one baseball, which is kind of crazy. So earlier in the season, what's really crazy is that Lake Central had two different pitchers throw perfect games in the same day. So that was something that I don't know that I can ever remember hearing anything like that.
Yeah, that was crazy. I mean, and so that story was crazy. We had Amanda Ardem, I hope I'm saying that correctly. She threw the first perfect game of the day against Mishawaka this last Saturday during the Lake Central Classic. It was a 3-game slate. So she threw the first one in the first game, and it was like 10-5 inning win. And she also hit a home run in that game, so she was really on top of her game. And then in the third game, we had Peyton Pepkowski, who's a Loyola recruit. She threw a perfect game, and it was a 1-0 win over Franklin Central, which was probably Lake Central's toughest one of the season. They're 11-0, but that win in particular was like their closest game. I mean, the other ones are usually beating teams pretty easily. But yeah, that was she pitched the gym. They needed it, obviously, because they only won. I mean, you won 1-0. So I asked both of them whose perfect game was better, and they wouldn't tell me. And it was in good, just all in fun. I didn't expect a real answer. But I told them, and I asked them about this, and they were telling me how amazing it is to be a part of a team that's so talented, where you're really being pushed to compete every day, even in practice. I mean, Peyton Pepkowski is their ace, but at the same time, it's not like she's just the only great player on their team. They have a couple other Division I recruits, and obviously they're, I think they're ranked number 2 in the state right now. They're ranked, I think, nationally in the Max Preps poll. So they're, they're a really good team. So I'm excited to see what's next for them. I know that this spring has been off to a great start for that team, and they have high aspirations. But to have 2 perfect games in one day was insane. I was like, wait, what? And then an even crazier story, Mike, is the Kankakee Valley girl, Mary Kate Schultz. She threw a perfect game, which is believed to be the second one in her program history. She threw this one against Andrean last week. And what's crazy about it is this is her first time playing for her school since she was a freshman. Her sophomore, last year was canceled due to COVID-19, which is her junior year. And her sophomore year, she actually had a broken back and was out for the entire year. And when I asked her how she broke her back, she told me she didn't know. She just thought she had, just regular muscle tightness and soreness. And then, she was misdiagnosed by doctors, and then I guess finally had some tests done and x-rays and things like that. And it revealed that she had a back fracture. So she was out for her entire sophomore season. So she was really excited, obviously, to throw a perfect game, but it meant a lot more to her personally just because of everything she's kind of gone through in the last 2 years. I mean, to lose a year because of COVID and lose a year because of what you thought was just, some back pain, it turns out to be a fractured back, was crazy. So that was a fun story to write. Now, I actually had a separate story on that one just because of everything she had gone through. And the cool thing about that, too, is Amanda Suarez, who is her coach. She played at Hanover Central when they won the state championship in 2004. And she actually threw a perfect game in the state championship. So you got a coach who threw a perfect game, and now she's coaching a kid who threw a perfect game, which was cool. And to round out the perfect games, Hobart Baseball's, Gavin Gallagher threw a 5-inning Mercy Rule perfect game against Westville about 2 weeks ago. And Mike, the cool thing about that is he didn't know about it, because I was like, hey man, did you know you were perfect? And he's like, no, I didn't. He was like, actually, I was done pitching, and then we needed 2 more runs to win, and that's what my coach told me. I had a perfect game going, and he was like, yeah, I was pretty happy that my team got the 2 more runs that we needed to win on a Mercy Rule, so I didn't have to go back out there. Otherwise, I would have been nervous. So, the other pitchers I talked to on the girls' side for softball, they were telling me they knew that they had something brewing, or they were kind of aware that they had a really good game going, and he just really did not know at all.
Wow.
So that was cool. His is believed to be the first one in program history. I believe he had 12 strikeouts that day, so he was dealing. And it's just, I think the headline we had for print was like perfect storms or something like that, and it's pretty crazy to have that amount, especially considering that we didn't play at all last year. So obviously things are back in full swing, and it's really cool to see these kids accomplish these things and to get a chance to write about these unique accomplishments, because that's every pitcher's dream, is to throw a perfect game. We're not talking about no hitters, we're talking about perfect games, which is crazy to me. So I enjoy writing about that, reaching out to those kids, and obviously I told them you'll be famous for a day when I write about you, and they appreciated that. So that was cool. You never know what's going to happen. Like I said, I reached out to the Kankakee Valley pitcher, MK as they call her, Mary Kate, and at the end of our interview, she told me, yeah, this is really cool because, a couple years ago I had a broken back. And I'm like, okay, well, this interview just got a little bit longer. Can you explain what that means? And, so I had a good time putting those stories together.
And as we said earlier, it's also the time when schools are putting their coaching staffs together. So we've got a bunch of new hires that you can maybe run down real quick for us here, too.
Yes, Wheeler has a new football coach, Robert Kanaya. He's a longtime region assistant coach. He's coming over from Chesterton to lead the Wheeler program. He was also an assistant at Wheeler a while back, so he's familiar with the school. He's actually a science teacher at the school. He's been there for the last 4 years teaching science, so he's got a chance to finally coach and teach at the same school. So he takes over for Adam Hudak, who resigned earlier this year. And then we also have River Forest, who hired a new football coach, Dimitri Blanco. He was a star quarterback at Andrean, and he spent the last few years under Phil Mason at Michigan City. He replaces Joe O'Connell, who went over to Crown Point with Craig Buzia, who was recently hired there. And then a surprise thing that I kind of woke up to, shout out to Bo Patton for this, the Maryville boys basketball coach, who texted me and said, hey, my little sister got a job as the Highland girls basketball coach. Taught her everything she knows. Don't know how true that is. But, so his little sister, Darian Straughter, who played at Maryville and was also an assistant coach at Maryville the last 4 years, she took over at Highland for Chris Tomsey, who just texted me now during this interview, because I reached out to him earlier about this whole coaching change, and he told me that he actually resigned from Highland at the end of the season. He wasn't forced out, no ill will, anything like that. So those are the three coaching hires that I have coming. The Wheeler story is already out. The story on the River Forest football coach and the new Highland girls basketball coach will be out later today, which is April 21st, a Wednesday. And, with that, also talking about what I've been doing. And, Mike, you can talk about what you've been doing over there and, our home state.
Right. So this is week 6 of football, which means it's also the last week of the football season. No playoffs in Illinois. So last week was rivalry week for District 215 for the wooden shoe / mushroom trophy. And that's what the trophy has. It's got a wooden shoe and a mushroom on it, and it's kind of a throwback to the origins of Lansing and Cal City. It's always a big game. This game was at TF North. I was there last Saturday afternoon. TF South won the game 25-0, and TF South is now 4-1. TF North is 1-3. They missed the game because of being in COVID protocols, not of their own doing, but because a ref of a game they had played the week before tested positive, and because of contact tracing, they were out. But I've been to a lot of these games over the years, and it's kind of interesting because my career at the time just kind of come full circle. Some folks who may be listening may remember I came to the Times for the first time in 1988, and at that time I was covering a lot of TF North, TF South games. Hadn't seen one for probably more than a dozen years. Well, I know it was more than a dozen years because I left in 2007 before coming back in 2019, so I missed a lot of these games. But, it always brings out and even this year it brought out a decent crowd. Not quite as big a crowds as you would normally expect because of COVID protocols and everything. But South's playing pretty well right now. They have both teams have one more game left. But a little bit more related news. One of the people that I saw when I got there a little bit before the game was Jerry Munda, who maybe some of the old timers who may be listening to this will remember. Jerry Munda was a grad of Thornton Fractional High School. The school split into two in the late 50s. He graduated in 1956 from Thornton Fractional. He was their baseball coach at TF North, which was the original school. Basically, TF South was the new school. He was the baseball coach there from 68 to 2001. He was also the football coach from 83 to 93. And it was just great talking to him. I mean, he's 84 years old, and James, if you and I look as good as he does at 84, then we'll be in pretty good shape. But also, it was interesting, too, because I actually talked to Jerry a couple of days before. Don Hakes passed away. Actually, well, we talked about, I wrote 2 obituaries last week. I don't think we chatted about those because of the timing of the podcast, but Bill Brick, who was one of the most respected baseball scouts in the country. He worked for about 40 years, actually maybe even a little bit longer than that, for various teams, the Pirates, the Padres, the D-backs. At the time of his death, he was the special assistant to the general manager of the Diamondbacks. Helped a lot of kids in their baseball careers over the years. He was this high-level scout, but he ran clinics in the area for years. And we've got a lot of photos in our archives of him, showing kids how to hit or how to pitch and everything. So that was one. And then Don Hakes, who was a dean at TF North for more than 30 years, also was a high-level NFL official. He worked 3 Super Bowls, worked 21 NFL playoff games total. And, I remember him not even so much for the football side, but he was also a basketball official. And he did a lot of high-level games around the south suburbs over the years. So, and he and Jerry Munda had worked together, which is kind of circling back to how this whole little tangent started. But Jerry was able to tell me a few stories about Don, which was kind of cool. And those stories are up on our website. I shared them on Twitter too, Don Hakes' obituary and Bill Brick's obituary. So we were switching also to spring sports. Actually, they're going on at the same time as the end of quote-unquote fall sports. Like I said, football ends this week. Baseball is underway, actually. So, I'm kind of all over the place with that stuff, but kind of normal this year in this most unusual year. One other thing to note, South Suburban College is playing at the NJCAA Division II National Tournament down in Danville, Illinois right now. They lost their opener, and it's actually a double elimination tournament, partly because they don't want to bring in teams from all over the country and say one and done, so they give teams a chance to play a few games because this is also a big recruiting tool, as you would imagine, especially in this year. Yeah. I mean, in any year it is, but it's a chance for, some of the top JUCO players in the country to get a chance to show themselves. And, a lot of college D1 and D2, D3 AI coaches keep an eye on this. But I wrote last week about DeShondre Washington, who was a state champ at Morgan Park in high school, and kind of an interesting career. He played one game at Robert Morris out in Pittsburgh, came back home because he had some family tragedies. 2 of his uncles and his little sister all passed away, and he felt it was best for him to be close to his family. He came back. He's probably going to be the Division II Player of the Year in among junior colleges. He's leading the nation in scoring, tied for the lead in rebounding. But Chance Love is the player I wrote about this week. And, again, the old-timers out there, he is the son of Bob Love, who was one of the most beloved players in Bulls history. James, your dad, probably kind could tell you a little bit about Bob Love. He played in the 60s and 70s. When he retired, he was the leading scorer in Bulls franchise history. Well, we know that doesn't exist anymore. So
yeah, I have no idea who holds the record now.
I know, right? So yeah, so it's a cool story, and of course we talked about that. And Chance Love is pretty at ease with his legacy. I mean, he said everywhere he goes, people talk about it. And his dad, again, was a great player for the Bulls, and probably their first big star. Him and Chet Walker were the first two big stars, because the Bulls were, for those who may not know, they were an expansion franchise in the late 60s. And him and Chet Walker were kind of the two guys that, made basketball come alive. It's kind of a strange thing to think about, but in my lifetime, pro basketball took a long time to take hold in Chicago. And when you think about where it is now, and where it was in the 80s and 90s, it's kind of strange to think about that, but that's the way it was. I mean, there were a bunch of failed teams, that came and went, and nobody really could make it work. It was very much a college basketball town with DePaul and Loyola, but then the Bulls came along. People like Bob Love made them a big deal. And again, so now his son is kind of making a niche for himself, which is, kind of a cool story. So I do have, I'm just looking at our list here real quick. I did have another cool story last Friday. I went out to Roosevelt Park, which is immediately north of the now closed Roosevelt High School, and it is there are several Little League fields there, but U.S. Steel and the Railcats got together for a cleanup day at Roosevelt Park, and they took a Little League field that had been kind of, over the pandemic year, it wasn't used at all last year. They didn't play there, and it showed. The Railcats groundskeeper actually tore out the infield, took 3 inches of dirt and grass off, and they put down an infield, what they call limestone screenings. And you've seen these at different parks and stuff. Basically, it's a low-maintenance material, better than dirt or grass. Water just pretty much soaks in or rolls off, so you can play on it with a minimum of maintenance. But kids in Gary have a brand-new field, essentially. They painted the dugouts, replaced some bad boards in the bleachers, freshened up the press box, pulled out weeds along the fence line in the outfield, and it's just tremendous what they've done. It's a great thing that the Railcats have done, and also U.S. Steel, which provided a lot of the manpower. There are about 60 people out there doing all sorts of stuff, and trying to get youth baseball back for Gary. And I wrote about it a little bit in the story. It's the tough thing about youth baseball in Gary is just the geographical size of the city. Think about it, it goes all the way from Klein Avenue, the Hammond Gary line, all the way out to the Porter County line. It's just such a massive geographic area. It's hard to bring kids together necessarily. There used to be a bunch of leagues in Gary, and a lot of them have combined over the years. Now this is the Calumet Regional Little League is what they're calling it now. It's the combination of Miller and Gary Metro, and it also takes in a little bit of Lake Station and Maryville. But everybody's rooting for this to work and to take root, because much has been talked about, how the game has been kind of languishing, among minority kids. Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of African Americans who play baseball anymore. If you look at the rosters, there are certainly a lot of black players, but they're not necessarily Americans. They come from the Dominican, from different Caribbean nations and stuff like that. So, trying to grow the game. And there's some efforts that are paying off too. There's a program that MLB has called the RBI program, Reviving Baseball in Inner Cities. That's what it's called. It's got a very strong program in Chicago. But there's also, there's also definitely a space for Little Leagues, Cal Ripken, some of the other organizations that are out there. And anyway, that was a cool story. I was really happy to do that, to put a little bit of a spotlight on people who are trying to grow the game. And it feels like a good segue to what we're going to talk about next, which is the intersection of real life and sports. And everybody who's listening to us knows that the Derek Chauvin murder trial ended yesterday with 3 guilty verdicts for second-degree murder, third-degree murder, second-degree manslaughter. And we've talked about this a lot on the podcast because it's a part of the world we live in. And again, that's always been part of our mission at the Times, which is to, put sports in its perspective as part of the world we live in. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, so I reshared my column that I wrote shortly after George Floyd was murdered almost a year ago. So the way I see it, and a lot of people are sharing how they feel about it, which is very fair, but I do want to make the point that there was a lot of voices that were used to, in my opinion, get this result. I don't know what happens if, this wasn't recorded on video and people all around the world weren't marching. And I want to make sure people know that included in those people marching and protesting and speaking out, there were a lot of athletes that did so. And there were a lot of athletes that spoke out yesterday about what happened. The WNBA, in my opinion, is the league that pushes a lot of societal issues to the forefront, including George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and other, cases like that. And I think that ultimately, decided the outcome of this trial. I've been waiting to say this for a year because I guess it's official now, but to the people that keep saying oh, this is justice, if you view it that way, more power to you. But the way I see it, Mike, seriously, is that we all saw a black man get murdered by a white police officer, former police officer now, on camera. So to me, it's not really justice. It's not this, pat yourself on the back type of thing. It's what was supposed to happen. We saw a murder happen on camera, so we sent the murderer to jail. It's as simple as that. But I think a lot of people were just relieved with the outcome. I think the craziest part about it all was sitting there and waiting for it to happen and not knowing which way it could go. And people who tried to diminish that fact, you either are very just naive or you're just dismissive of the history of this country. I mean, you can go back to Emmett Till. You can talk about, even more recently, Trayvon Martin. You can talk about the way these things kind of affect black people. So I think it was important to see black people and black athletes rally around what happened with George Floyd and ultimately get a chance to speak their mind about it. So I can go on for this stuff forever. People obviously agree, disagree. I personally don't care. I think that the fact remains a murder took place. The world saw it. And so that murderer went to prison. Do I feel sorry for him? Absolutely not. I think that it's you had 9 minutes to get off somebody's neck and you didn't do it. And that's on you, completely on you. No other people told you to do that. People were pleading for you to stop and you did so anyway. So I won't lie. Personally, I felt vindicated sharing the article that I did again yesterday. And I think that from a personal standpoint, it means something to me and it means something to the kids that look like me. I just want them to know that hopefully if these things happen to us, which I hope never happens again, but if it does, there's some type of accountability for that. So There's so many layers to it. I mean, you can go on and on about just dissecting all the things that took place, but the bottom line is murder happened on camera for the world to see, and in my opinion, the right action was handed down.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I have some thoughts too, and I guess one of them is that George Floyd was a brother, a boyfriend, a family member, and he's gone for no reason. No reason. The alleged offense of attempting to pass the forged $20 bill, that's a misdemeanor. It's a ticket, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he winds up dead because of that, I mean, it's incomprehensible to me. And I know that these things happen all the time. A 16-year-old girl was shot and killed by Columbus police around the time of the murder, or the time of the verdict being announced, rather. I mean, this stuff happens all the time. And, again, I'm just thinking about George Floyd. He was 47 years old. 47. Think about that. If he lives his normal life expectancy, which in America right now is, I think, around 76 or 77, he had 30 more years,
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't have those 30 years for, again, no good reason. And I mean? And one of the things that's been shared a lot, I'm sure you've seen it, is the original police news release, which said that there was a man who died because of a medical incident after a police interaction. If you haven't seen it, go read it. Go read it. That's what I would say to you, because it was a complete lie. The police lied about it, and somebody approved that. Now, it wasn't, I don't know who wrote that release. Obviously, it wasn't, an officer who was on the scene, but somebody somewhere in the Minneapolis Police Department wrote that lie and put it out there. And if it wasn't for a 17-year-old girl who videotaped it on her phone and put it out there almost immediately, we would not have known about what really happened. I mean, we might have known what happened, but it would have been a he said, she said kind of a situation, and you know how those go.
Mm-hmm.
The authorities always win those. But here you had incontrovertible video evidence of what happened, and people calling on Derek Chauvin to stop.
Yes.
George Floyd saying, I can't breathe, 20 times. And bystanders calling on him to stop, and him pulling out mace and holding the crowd off, and looking at them. So, I mean, this turned out to be the tipping point. I mean, there have been so many others. We talked about it, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, there are all of these hashtags out there and all of these cases that we've seen, and nothing has come of any of them until now. And I totally agree with you that, this is not something for rejoicing. This is something this is the way the system is supposed to work. Someone commits a serious crime, they're punished. They're tried, convicted, punished for it. That's the way it's supposed to work. And, the concern that we saw from people who were more worried about, are there going to be protests? Are there going to be windows broken? If the verdict goes the other way, which, first of all, how does it even go the other way? But that's where we're at. People thought the verdict could go the other way. People thought, in spite of all the evidence, that maybe the jury would not convict Derek Chauvin. And then, what if we have people protesting and windows getting broken? This is really what your concern is, that there's property damage. By the way, let's think about what happened in Washington on January 6th too. So, I mean, and we're I guess we're getting a little bit outside of what we would normally talk about. But I mean, this is what everybody's talking about. Again, our mission, which is to talk about sports in the context of the greater world out there. And as you've said, the WNBA has taken the lead in this. Certainly some NBA players too. There are players in other leagues as well. But all we can hope for is that this is the beginning of a reckoning, and that black and brown people don't get killed for no reason anymore. That's the bottom line. Stop killing black and brown people for no reason.
There you go. So I think that's a good message to end on. We'll be excited to come back next week with more news. Spring season is a little crazy right now with snow and rain and other things. But assuming that some games get played soon, we'll have more news for you soon. So just stay safe, wear your mask, and we'll talk to you soon.